Andrew Neil's article yesterday, I think, in the Daily Mail is striking not for novelty but for force. It distills a long simmering argument that the BBC's claim to impartiality has collapsed, that its leadership has neither the will nor the authority to reform the newsroom, and that the licence fee model is therefore doomed. His tone is elegiac rather than angry, as if he were describing an empire that cannot acknowledge its own decline. Yet the claims deserve careful examination. The current turmoil at the corporation makes his criticism unusually potent. Neil begins by setting the charge of bias not in external criticism but in the BBC's own internal memo. This is a deliberate rhetorical move. He wants to show that the most serious accusations now come from inside the system, not from its customary critics outside. And the memo's concerns about coverage of Donald Trump, Israel and transgender issues are used as Exhibit A. Neil's framing is simple. The BBC is no longer an antidote to misinformation. It is a contributor to misinformation. He then offers an historic contrast. In his early years at the BBC, he encountered mild leftward leanings, but a culture of professionalism held those instincts in check. A journalist might have personal views, but they are irrelevant at work. The newsroom's mission was shared, the discipline internalized. The contrast he draws with today's environment is central to his argument. He portrays a generational shift from professional distance to ideological immersion, from reporting to activism, from intellectual pluralism to social media moralizing. His citation of Mark Urban's reflections is perhaps the most telling part of his article. Urban is no culture war performance artist. He is respected, understated and classically BBC. When Urban reports that producers tried to veto interviews with J.K. Rowling or Rod Liddell, not on editorial grounds but because they were, quote, problematic, the example lands brilliantly. Brilliant piece of writing there. It is precisely the sort of quotidian newspaper behaviour that corrodes impartiality, not through grand conspiracies, but through daily micro-decisions that shape the ecosystem of who is heard and who is not. Neil also broadens the frame internationally. His claim is that public service broadcasters across democratic societies lean left not because of conspiracy but because of sociology. Talented graduates with progressive politics cluster in big cities, and the institutions that recruit from those pools reproduce the same worldview. He reinforces the argument by invoking Australia, Canada, France, Germany, and the United States. His intention is not to criticize them individually, but to suggest that the problem is structural and international, not specifically British. Where his argument sharpens is in his assessment of remedies. He suggests that given a strong head of news, that even that person would struggle because the culture is now so embedded. He cites Robbie Gibb as an example. The one figure willing to challenge the drift is immediately caricatured as engineering a right-wing coup. The idea is to show that internal resistance is punished, external criticism is discounted, and institutional inertia wins. In this picture, no reformer survives first contact with the machine. Neil then makes the economic argument. Two long-standing pillars justify the licence fee, impartial news, and high-quality drama. Yet the most praised British drama on television today is produced by US streamers. And if the BBC cannot defend its impartiality, the news pillar cracks too. The numbers he cites are stark. 300,000 fewer licences in a single year. 3.6 million households saying they no longer need one. Up to £1 billion lost in revenue from evasion and cancellation. This data strengthens his thesis. The public mood has already shifted and the licence fee's moral authority has thinned. Now, some of that might simply be the propaganda from various political movements trying to change the licence fee. They have rooted. It might also be from the series of scandals which have been so enormous and so prominent, so well focused and so badly handled. He argues that Labour will renew the licence fee for ideological reasons, not because the model is sound. He sees a temporary reprieve, not salvation. Younger audiences will not pay for a service they do not watch. Enforcement will become untenable. The unresolved crisis of impartiality will accelerate erosion. And this is how he arrives at his most dramatic claim that the BBC is on track to become the digital age's Upper Clyde shipbuilders, a once proud institutional giant overtaken by structural change and left behind. Now place this analysis alongside the news cycle. The resignations of Tim Davie, Deborah Turness and now Shumeet Banerjee have exposed a leadership vacuum. The board is divided. Samir Shah, can he survive, faces a select committee appearance under heavy fire before the charter renewal. A leaked report has given ammunition to the BBC's fiercest critics, and the Panorama Trump edit has given Donald Trump the opportunity to threaten a multi-billion dollar lawsuit. In short, the corporation is in its most serious crisis of authority since the days of Hutton. Neil's timing is shrewd. His article appears not as a distant criticism, but as a direct commentary on an unfolding institutional breakdown. He's not simply diagnosing bias, he's arguing that the corporation can no longer command internal discipline or external trust. Yet, we must also assess the limitations of his analysis. There's no doubt that many younger journalists take their cues from contemporary activist culture, and Neil is right that this can distort judgment, but the BBC's crisis is not solely ideological. It's also technological, generational and financial. Every broadcaster in the world struggles with the shift to digital consumption, the collapse of scheduled viewing and the global dominance of algorithm-driven platforms. The BBC's bias problem intersects with these trends, but didn't cause them. Moreover, the BBC's audience still exceeds any single commercial competitor in reach and trust. The corporation's failures are real, but so are its strengths. And while Neil is correct that the newsroom requires cultural reform, he understands the historic importance of maintaining a national institution capable of serving as a shared reference point in a fragmented media landscape. Nevertheless, the core of his argument stands. Without serious visible correction to its editorial culture, the BBC will lose the legitimacy on which the licence depends. And legitimacy once lost is not easily recovered. The events of the past fortnight suggest that the crisis is no longer theoretical. The newsroom is polarised, the board is at war with itself, leadership has collapsed, a select committee awaits, and the public is losing patience. Neil frames all this as inevitability. That is the weakest point in his thesis. Institutions decline not because their fate is fixed, but because they refuse to confront the problems in time. If the BBC chooses candour, discipline and genuine pluralism, it can still recover. But if it clings to denial or treats criticism as hostility rather than diagnosis, then his prediction of an inexorable decline will prove prophetic. The question is not whether Andrew Neil is right, the question is whether the BBC is willing to listen before the point of no return is reached.